Again, welcome to this session. I'll zoom in here a little bit. I'm Rod Tostin, and I wear a couple different hats here at the college. I'm the Vice President for Information Technology. I graduated here in '85 and returned in the early '90s as a computer science professor. And I got to tell you, I'm really excited about these J-term sessions. Little piece of trivia. Back in the early '80s, when I was a student here, we took 4 courses in the fall, 1 during the month of January, 4 in the spring. My senior year, in January of 1985, was the last time that any type of J-term programming was offered by the college until this year. Flash forward 36 years, and J-term's back, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and excited you all are part of it too. And we're all together starting a brand new tradition here at the college, and it's just wonderful. So thank you very much. Paul's going to introduce himself. I'm going to talk a little bit about the intention of our session, and then we'll move on. So my colleague, Paul.
Thanks, Rod. I won't say how old I am, but let's just say it's almost as many years as J-term hasn't been a thing. So good to be part of the first inaugural in almost my lifetime and asked to co-facilitate with you today. Thank you all for being here. This is a really important topic to me and to, on this day of a presidential inauguration. It's important for our society and our work together to advance important ideals. So thank you for taking the time to invest in your skill set in whatever area you plan to serve our society. Again, my name is Paul. I serve as the director of the Garthwaite Leadership Center. And in that capacity, I really wear 2 hats. One hat is to support and supervise experiential education here at the college. That's grab, challenge course, things like that. I also work with groups. I believe that individuals can be bright and brilliant and amazing. And when you bring individuals together, it can be worse than the individual. It can be terrible. We've all experienced group dysfunction where the sum of the parts is less than the whole. But I also think that when you bring groups together in intentional ways and design dialogues and experiences to bring out the best of each person, the sum can be so much greater than the parts. So I've been working with groups for the last 20 years, serving in different roles, but the consistent piece has always been facilitation. So I'm excited to offer a little bit of that experience and learn more about where you're coming from and what you're hoping to get out of the session. So again, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Paul. And as I mentioned before, I'm in the Innovation and Creativity Lab in the West Building on campus. This is a space that's open to all students 24/7. Josh Wagner, the manager of the lab, is helping us today. Hey, Josh. And he welcomes all visitors back here to the lab, room 114. So why are we all here? My wife's a yoga instructor, and so she always sets intentions for her sessions, her yoga sessions. And so I thought we should have one here. And so basically, this is for you to get excited and passionate about facilitating discussions, along with becoming aware of the tools and skills needed to facilitate a discussion. So I want to just slide back to the skills and the tools. And throughout this, you're going to be experiencing a little bit of a facilitated discussion as well. It's a little bit of a mix. And so I ask you to just, pause and reflect as we go through different parts of this and see if you can identify some of the stages, some of the concepts, some of the topics that we're going to introduce here today, because we're going to ask you later on in this session, what were some of the aspects of a facilitated discussion that you experienced here today? So I want to give you a little heads up, take some notes, jot down some words, and we'll ask you about them later. So Paul, back to you.
So we asked you to complete a survey. It had 2 questions, and what we saw is that you're hoping to learn a couple things. And Josh, feel free to just keep bringing those up. Confidence is something that I have struggled with in facilitation. I know many folks that are learning this art and science do as well. How to prepare, how to manage nerves and emotion. How to get folks engaged. We're going to be spending a fair amount of time talking about participation today. Techniques for enriching discussions that involve many viewpoints. How to, again, get people engaged in actually discussions. You've probably been on many Zoom calls in the past year, and you've been put in breakout rooms, and you can hear the crickets. And it's painful when engagement doesn't happen. And then finally, how to prepare. What are the steps? What are the things that you can do to set yourself up for success? So in order to do what Rod outlined as our objectives and to meet your expectations, I want to share some guiding principles with you. Sometimes these are called ground rules or working assumptions. They go by many names, but they're essentially what I offer to this space, ways of behaving as a group, some expectations, some thoughts, some assumptions that I have about how we can accomplish the goals that we have. So first, I believe that each of you, Rod, Josh, and I, we all have wisdom, and we need everyone's wisdom for the wisest result. I believe that you will be heard and you'll hear today, and we'll try to create space for you to be heard in different mediums. So whether that's in chat, whether that's in verbalizing in a small group or verbalizing a large group, or through some of our polls and surveys. I believe that engagement is key to learning. So if you're doing 3 other things while you're listening to this, you're not going to get as much out of it than if you sit down and focus. And I know that's different for each of us. So know that that's not a consistent expectation, but we do know that engagement matters for learning. And finally, Zoom, our platform today can be awkward. You may have tech challenges. Your roommate or pet may join us on the call. Feel free to introduce them if it's appropriate. Feel free to let life be. If you need to step away from the call for a couple of moments to take care of a human need, please do that. If you're not able to be fully present, step away, take care of the need, and come back on. If you get kicked off, do your best. If you're having problems, put something in chat and we'll support you. Finally, the awkwardness of this platform is also an opportunity to engage. So please do use all the different methods that are available to you. The chat is open. Feel free to use that. Feel free to unmute yourself when we ask you for that engagement. Please do respond to the polls using the Mentimeter. And finally, at the end, we've carved out a lot of time for your questions. And we'll let you ask those both verbally and through an anonymous method. So write those down throughout the session, and we really want to spend some time focused in on what matters to you. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Rob.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Josh, if we could flip to the next slide. So this is going to be the first opportunity for you to do some sharing and to work it with another person. So we're going to go into a breakout session in pairs for about 5 minutes. So we're asking you to share your name and why you signed up for this session with the other person. Share an example of a poorly facilitated discussion. We've all been there. And then why did you think it, was poorly facilitated? What were some of the aspects and some of the skills that you might be wanting to learn today so you don't make those same mistakes? So with that, I'm going to ask Josh to move into the breakout rooms, and I'm anxious to hear your experience when you come back. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Oh, I need to get this screen up. I need to get this window away. So in your breakout session, in your breakout pairs or groups, can you share 3 words with us describing what you shared in the breakout room, maybe what you felt, just a few words so we can get a sense and share across all the groups. And you will do this through the Mentimeter. If you have any questions with that, just let us know. It'll be exciting to see some of the thoughts coming in. I'm assuming people's putting words in, Josh. Oh, here we go. Time management, open to all opinions. That's great. Like them. Organization. Different perspectives, important. Listening is important. Being calm, yes. Yes. It's tough for me after 6 shots of espresso toward the end of the day, but it's something I still strive for.
I see the word awkwardness. I just want to call out one of my favorite things to say about facilitation is lean into the awkward. So appreciate that.
Embrace it. Icebreakers, good, good. We're going to talk about some icebreakers. Look what showed up in the middle. I really like that. So, any questions? This looks good to me. I love all these words. With that, Paul, should we move on to your quiz? This is great. Thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed seeing the listening word in the middle. Very important.
Absolutely. So we're gonna switch now a little bit and talk about language to help us understand what facilitation is and is not. Because when we do things that aren't facilitation, but we think we're facilitating, it can actually cause all sorts of confusion for the groups that we're working with and also ourselves. We don't get to the outcome that we think we will. We're not sure how we got there. So I have a quick little quiz. This is not graded. It's just to assess kind of what you're coming in with. So there are going to be 4 slides. And in a second, but not yet, the first slide is going to come up. It's going to have a statement at the top with some language. And I want you to choose which of the 4 leadership tasks it's most describing. Is it facilitation? Is it presenting? Is it consulting? Or is it coaching? I'll give you a hint. We only use each word once. We'll quickly see the results. I'll give you about 20 seconds to take the quiz and see the results of others, and then we'll move on to the next one. So there are going to be 4 of these, rapid fire. Here we go. Josh, let's present the first question. So what is this? To extend and enrich knowledge, skills, or attitudes? Is it presenting, facilitating, coaching, or consulting? And if you want to see what others are saying, you can look at the shared Zoom screen. That's where we have the results coming up in real time here. Okay, so the group is thinking it's either presenting or coaching. Good. Good. No one thinks it's facilitating. No one thinks it's consulting. Feel free to take a risk in that we don't know who's saying what right now. Okay, Josh, let's go to the next one. I think we have most of folks responded. To conduct a meeting where the purpose is dialogue, shared decision-making, planning, or problem solving, the act of directing the process. What do you think this might be? Okay.
Good stuff.
Yeah, appreciate folks having some courage and diverging from the pack. If you haven't submitted yet, please do still submit. If you think it's something that isn't represented right now, have no fear. If you think this is coaching or presenting, make sure to say that.
I like the animation and everything with this. This is nice.
It's a little different. I like it. Okay, let's go to the next one, Josh. So to be an information specialist, serving as an advocate for specific content or processes, influencing a group's methodology.
Yeah.
It's like we may have some management folks in the room.
Yes. Yeah.
Good, good. Appreciate you thinking. Critical thinking is important here. I might be trying to trick you. Okay, and finally, one more, Josh. Supporting an individual to move towards goals while simultaneously helping develop expertise in planning, reflecting, and problem solving. What word describes this work?
Yeah.
Give folks just a couple more moments to choose an answer. Feel free to diverge from the group. Great, thank you all for submitting your thoughts on that pretest. Now we're going to take a different approach to look at these things. So the next slide that we're going to consider is a coordinate grid without coordinates. So it's essentially two axes, and our four words are presented in each of the grids. So the vertical axis is going to look at, are we working with multiple people or a large group or an individual? And there's a range, right? And then our horizontal axis is going to be looking at who has the knowledge and expertise. Is it the leader, the person standing up front and doing the work? Or is it, on the other end, the group or the individual that's coming to do the work? This axis can help us really start to nuance some of the differences that become really, really important with facilitation. One thing that I see confounded the most is presenting and facilitating. So the primary difference here is who has the knowledge, right? It's working with groups. So as Rod mentioned earlier, this call is a mix of both. Sometimes we're asking you for your expertise and knowledge. A lot of times, especially in the beginning of this call, we're presenting. We're conveying information. It's specific, it comes from our expertise. There may be facilitation experts in this group, we just don't know right now, right? So it's really important, if you want to facilitate a dialogue, but you spend a lot of time being the knowledge expert, that's going to cause confusion for the group, and it's not going to allow you to get to your results. I want to pause here and see if there are any questions about the difference between facilitating and presenting as I've laid it out on this axis. Feel free to either type something into the chat or unmute yourself. So this isn't complicated, right? Like, you could say this is common sense. But if you think back to your facilitation example, maybe you shared it with your partner in your small group, where it wasn't a good discussion, my guess is there may have been too much presenting, or somebody was trying to consult or coach in a large group setting. So these distinctions are really important for us as we move forward. And I would suggest the key difference with facilitation is the goal of group participation, getting the expertise from the group members into a shared space so that the whole group can benefit from it. Many of you mentioned that as something you'd like to learn is how to increase participation in group setting. And I'd suggest that creating space for authentic participation is one of the central acts of facilitating. We'll come back to that point in a moment, but before we go there, I want to get your feedback on another question. So Josh, if you can go to the next slide for us, please. And let us know, as you think about facilitation, you're about to plan a meeting, how much time do you currently spend on each of these following tasks? You can slide the slider as far from the left or right from no time at all to kind of a lot of time. We just defined it as 3 hours, but if you spend more or less, that's fine. So give us a sense of how much time do you spend on each of these tasks?
Good question. I like this.
Okay. So we'll give folks some time to consider this question, and things are going to move around as the averages change.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like the different distributions coming up here, that, you know, there's different clumps. Intriguing.
Yeah, I'm really excited, actually. You all are brilliant. You're Gettysburg College students. I would expect this, but that there seems to be a little bit of a bias towards preparation, which is great. Which is one of our theses for today. We think that preparation is one of the keys to great facilitation. So, for instance, in preparing for this session, Rod, how long would you say we've spent talking, thinking, working together on this 1.5 hour session? Any guesses?
We met for at least 6 hours, and I probably spent at least that by myself.
Yeah, same here, same here. Hopefully it shows in the execution.
Me too, me
We'll
too.
see, we'll see. But that's the point of where we are in the presentation. Preparation is key. If you're not spending a lot of time in preparation, your expectations for the actual facilitation shouldn't be as high, right? Because it takes a lot of intent. So the rest of our presentation is going to be about kind of these three major components. And Josh, we can go to the next slide. Essentially, we're going to talk about preparation. We're going to talk about some things you can do before the discussion to create psychological safety, and we'll define that term. We're going to talk about how to actually structure the discussion. Rod's going to be spending a good amount of time talking through a process for that. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about after the discussion. How do you follow up both with the group to maximize the results of the facilitation, and also with yourself? How do you carry that language forward? Okay, so let's go to the next slide, and this is around preparation. And I'd suggest that there are three main things you need to be thinking about with preparation. One is, what are the aims of the discussion? Why are you bringing together these wonderful, precious, unique snowflakes into a shared space to get their wisdom? What's the outcome? What's the aim? Is it you want to get their input on a decision? You want to make a decision? You want to plan an event? You want to celebrate something, right? Like, these are all very different types of facilitative experiences. And if you're not crystal clear about the why, it's going to cause problems in your design. We'll talk more about the design in just a moment. The next thing you want to think about is, oh, let's go back one. We're still on that slide. Sorry about that. What's the setting? What's the space that you want to do this? If you're able to do it in person, what type of room? What decorations do you want? What do you want people to feel and experience in that space? How do you set up the chairs? Should we be in a circle? Should we be in a square? Should we be in lines? These are all decisions that, as the facilitator, you get to make as part of your preparation. And then finally, you get to actually draft a design. People do this in lots of different ways, but the key is to write it down, because as you write it down, you'll start to see things that need to be reordered or are missing. Rod and I have a very detailed plan for this. At some point in the question and answers, if you're curious, you can ask about this, and we'll share our screen and show you kind of what our draft looks like. And the thing is, the key word here is draft, right? Because even in the moment, it's going to change. So I'm sure at some point we're going to go off script and start doing things that are different from what we intended in order to support the group's outcomes. So that's the preparation. Okay, now let's go to the next slide. And this is just a different way to visualize this information. So as you sit down in your preparation, I'd encourage you to think through 5 steps. The first is in the center, and it's the core. It's your why. Simon Sinek talked about the power of why. And I would suggest that that is the most important concept. People's time is valuable. You know how hard it is to find common meeting times. When we waste that time, we lose precious credibility and we cause harm. So the why is key. The next is the who. Who's the group? What's their previous experience? What do they expect from the time? What limitations may they have? What technology supports will they need? What are the different learning styles and approaches? How can you make the dialogue accessible to all? This has gotten much more complicated in coronavirus era with technology. And you're all experiencing that. So we're always thinking about who are we serving to keep that top of mind. Next, we want to think about the environment. Again, what's the best setting? So today we chose Zoom as the primary communication platform, but we're also using Mentimeter as part of the environment. It's what you see, it's what you interact with. You don't really touch, smell, and taste it, but in a real life environment, you want to think about those things. Should there be food? Should there be some sort of scent in the space that's going to be helpful? These are all design questions. Next, you want to think about the form. This is often where our minds go first. It's the actual, what are the different components of the session? It's the questions that we ask. It's the pauses that we give. It's the breaks that we take. The form is definitely something to consider, but only after these other 3 things. And then finally, you want to think about the roles. And the obvious roles here are, who's presenting, how are you co-facilitating, who's doing what, but also what are the power differentials between the different folks in the room? And what are the different identities that are represented between the facilitators and the group? That is essential to consider when thinking about facilitating a dialogue, because the roles come with a lot of assumption. And if you're not intentional about naming those assumptions or breaking down those assumptions, again, you may not reach your aim. So for design to matter, we have to consider the important concept of psychological safety. So psychological safety, and Josh, we can go to the next slide, is the belief that you won't be punished when you contribute to the process. And just give me some feedback, Rod. Have I frozen up right now?
You have, but we can hear you. And there you go, you're back.
Okay, good, good. So Josh, let's go to the next slide.
You mean the facility, we have to go back one. There we go, psychological safety.
Great, great, thank you. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
So let's go back to talk about psychological safety for just a bit, and the slides will catch up. Perfect. So for design to matter, we need to think about this. And psychological safety is the belief that you won't be punished when you contribute to the process, that wrong answers won't diminish your social standing in the group, that difference in opinion will be valued and not rebuffed, right? So psychological safety is key. And this also happens to be the one thing that all high-performing teams have in common. So considering how you'll create a space where folks experiencing psychological safety is a key part of your preparation. So here are some quick thoughts. Include guiding principles. Think about those guiding principles to make sure that everyone in the room can abide by them. Sometimes if you have time, you're going to be working with a group multiple times, or in an organization setting where you'll be meeting once a week for an entire semester. Develop those together. Post those, keep them present. These are the assumptions that we need to all come in about how we're going to be grouped together. Next, I'd suggest the connection before content. So what this means is we are all human. We all want to be known, and we want to know other people. We're relational beings. So find a way to honor that as part of your facilitation design, and you'll create increased psychological safety. Next, think about differential participation. Not everyone's going to be comfortable at the beginning of a meeting standing up and introducing themselves. So you want to think about how can you do things as large groups, as small groups, how can you do things verbally and visually to allow everyone in the room to participate. So let's just pause here real quick, and if folks can put in the chat, what are some different ways and different levels of differential participation that we've given you today? Just throw it in the chat for everyone to see, and I'm curious to see what you've noticed in this session thus far around this point.
There we go.
Yep, polling. It's anonymous. Allows folks to give their input without. What else? Thanks, Marco, for leading the way. Breakout rooms, yep, it's often easier to talk with one or two other people than to talk in front of 30. It's a great place to try on ideas. So thank you, Annabelle. Lighting questions, absolutely. Some of us engage best by question. So we're really excited to get to that point in this presentation. We'll get there soon. Great, those are three great examples, and there are others. There are others. And finally, psychological safety can be supported by inviting everyone to speak in the first 5 minutes. This doesn't have to be a round the room introduction. It can be just one other person. It can be something into the chat. It can be onto a slide, right? But having everyone somehow offer something to the room in the first 5 is going to help to create that psychological safety. Okay, so now that we've discussed preparation, I want to pass it off to Rod to discuss facilitating the actual discussion.
Well, thank you, Paul. I have to say, I really like that. I've never really thought about trying to get everybody to speak within the first 5 minutes, but that's really powerful. It gets things going. And I like that a lot. So just to let you know, we're 2 minutes ahead of schedule to our plan. So things are sliding along well. Yay, yay. So facilitating discussions, now we're getting into the process, and facilitating discussions, the discussion is a process that you help the group move through. And so Josh, let's flip to the overview. For me, in the sessions that I've been in or I've participated, I really see 4 different stages. That first thing of, engaging and active, everybody getting in, engaging, talking, and then sharing, getting a, familiar or, a general or group understanding of the important knowledge for the session. And then interacting, there's action, thinking, brainstorming, all those kind of things that the participants start to do. And then taking a pause, reflecting, and then planning for the future. And this rotates and changes. I've been in 2-day retreats where this process has moved through. We've moved through this process several different times, in the morning and in the afternoon and something like that. So let's dig into each one of these stages just a little bit more. And if you would, Josh, thank you. So 3 things I really want you to see here on this screen. Number 1, for each one of the stages, there's well-defined tasks and goals. And they, again, are verbs, they're action, something for the participants to do. And then we talked about possible activities. Somebody mentioned icebreakers before. This is a good place when you're trying to get everybody to move into the circle. And I want you to see the diagram. We have participants, we have a facilitator, and everybody, the whole group needs to come together and get into an area where we're going to start to reflect, we're going to start to prepare, and we're going to start to recognize where we all fit into this circle when we're starting into a discussion. We want to get into the discussion. This is the first stage. The next one, if you would, Josh. So now it's time for everybody to share and get a group shared understanding of the information that's important for the discussion. So, teaching each other, assimilating, sharing, those are some of the tasks. Activities, surveys, questionnaires, we did that for this session. Demonstrations and case studies are all great activities. And the diagram has changed. We're now sharing, and we could draw arrows all kinds of different ways between all the smaller circles here. But it's the concept that everybody equally is sharing, so the group has the knowledge. It's the group. It's not the facilitator. It's not an individual participant. It's about the group here. The next one, if you would, please, Josh. So now we're starting to engage, and you could start to see where there's experimentation as a task, practicing, interacting like we did in the breakout rooms, and the facilitator starts to fade away a little bit and step back. And that's what we did with the breakout rooms. We stayed in our space and we had you go out and practice and interact. So possible activities here, role plays for the participants. Facilitator just sets it up. Simulations, worksheets, and some kind of structured discussions. Those are possible activities for this third stage. And if you would, again, for the final slide, Josh. So planning for the future. It just doesn't stop. Bang, we're not just done. You have to be thoughtful about moving out and carrying on with everything else that happens in life. So this is where you would have participants will set goals, planning again, and applying. How am I going to apply these skills and these tools? Where am I going to take that to? Possible activities, practice, action plans, writing it right out onto a worksheet, goal setting, brainstorming solutions. This is where we might start to think about some solutions. And homework. So people are responsible and accountable for going out and practicing this. And the diagram is a visual for us. It's time for everybody to leave the group, take the knowledge and skills and their plans and move forward. So to the next one, if you would, Josh. And I think this is back to you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Rod. Okay, hang in there. We're almost to the point where we're going to pause and come back to your questions. And when we do that, Josh, if you can be ready to change the settings in the mentimeter so everyone can control and see the whole slideshow, I think that's going to be a helpful tool for during the question and answer session, because we recognize we're throwing a lot of information at you right now. Okay, so once the session's done, everyone leaves, you take a deep breath. Okay, whew, I lived through another facilitated session. People can throw things at me, worked through the agenda, great. That's where so many people close the book and move on to the next thing. This is where we would invite you and encourage you as aspiring and developing facilitators to pause. And really there are three things you want to consider. One, what notes were taken during the session? So oftentimes in a well-facilitated process, you'll have a visual, but you'll also have maybe something that the group co-constructs. So you may have someone at the front writing on a whiteboard what they hear. You may have quote papers around the room. There's lots of ways to do this. But often it's great to document those things, package it all together, and send it to all the participants. So that way they can continue to reflect and think about and carry forward the deliverables that the group produced in the space. The next thing you want to do is sit with the folks that you facilitated with, or if it's something where you worked on your own, sit with yourself, maybe sit with a friend and talk about the session. Think about all that went well, what some of the challenges were, what some of your successes were, celebrate those, what some of the interruptions were, and consider and choose one of those to carry forward as a lesson for future facilitated session. What's the thing you want to remind yourself of before you go into your next facilitation opportunity? That way you can continue to work on your craft and develop your skill. The one thing I want to name here is that professional facilitators have a higher instance of depression and anxiety. And one of the primary reasons for that is when a professional facilitator, when any facilitator does a great job, the group is going to think that the group did all the hard work, right? So all your preparation, all your in the moment work, the group's not going to remember that or see that. So they're not going to give you a lot of accolades. They may not even say, hey, good work, thank you so much, as they may after a good presentation. So it's important as a facilitator that you're reflective and thoughtful and recognize that when you've done a good job, the group may not say anything. So pay attention to that, point to ponder, but it's important for this work. With that, we're going to pass it back to Rod with questions.
Thanks, Paul. The first thing is I have a question for you, and I gave you a little hint that this was coming. So what aspects of a facilitated discussion have you experienced so far in this session? And if you could go to mentimeter like you've been doing so well and put that information in. What aspects? I want to start throwing out examples, but I'm afraid I'll hand out some answers at the same time. I just have to smile here. Group sharing? Yeah, great. Excellent, excellent. This is my first time using Mentimeter. Boy, I really like it. I just, well, I used it Monday, but I mean, this week is the first time. So this is great. I love how we can get this, this feedback. It's fun.
Love to hear from a couple more folks. What have we done? And don't feel like you have to use our language, but as you think back over the last hour, what's one thing that you've experienced that might not be represented up here so far? Sorry that your screen changed. Now the text box is going. Is it possible to reset this or allow people? It's back. Yay. Yay. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Sarah, for letting us know about that. Yep. Oh, I gotta move everybody around to see that part of the screen here. That's great. Goals laid out, great, great. Yeah, we'll have to show them our plan. Josh, you can get to that, can't you? Not, it doesn't have to be now, but I think it'd be neat for them to see what we did. Thank you. These are fantastic, fantastic responses. Anything else anybody sharing? I like it. Thanks, Josh. So fantastic responses. Any thoughts on these, Paul?
No, I always appreciate a question like this because as a facilitator, now that we're shifting from presenting to really trying to facilitate dialogue through questions, it helps me want to understand who the group is. So based on these responses, I know what kind of floated to the surface and you were willing to share it. So thanks for being willing to put some words here. And I invite that continued courage in this space. We're all learning about this art of facilitation. So as we transition now into questions, please feel free to make them hard, make them chewy, disagree with what we've said. Tell us when you've tried something and it doesn't work, because we can probably workshop to figure out, okay, what may have needed to be attended to make that experience work better.
One quick thing, Josh, do you mind sharing the plan that we had, and then we can move into questions? Since we've talked about it so much, I think it'd be important for everybody to see what we did. Used a spreadsheet, and now you can scroll up to the top.
And as Josh finds this, know that you don't have to use a spreadsheet. You can use a Word document. You can use a scratch piece of paper. But for us, what had value is that we could share it and we could edit it in real time and we could talk about it. It was a tool. It's not it doesn't dictate how we work.
Just being in IT and technology, the spreadsheet's my friend. So I have a tendency to gravitate to that. Look like the scrolling, here we go. So could you scroll to the top, Josh? I hate to ask you after seeing, and I have to really take my hat off to Paul because he encouraged this, and that's the setting the goals, the individual goals, and what we wanted, the emotional, excited and passionate. Remember I mentioned that in the intention. Individual outcomes. These were things that we wanted you to have when you left this session. So we were thinking about you and this before we even moved on. And now we can get down into, I believe, Paul, you talked about the how.
Yeah, so here we basically lay out what it is that we want to do, the outcome that we're seeking to support, and then some notes on how we're going to do it. And this can be done at high resolution, or it can be done really, really low resolution. The key is that we're also trying to anticipate how much time it's going to take. The number one way to make people dislike a meeting or a session that you've facilitated is to go over time. So that's something that we're tending to, and sometimes you have to do it. You know, a group process needs more time to breathe. but rarely do you have to. So that's something that we were trying to attend to here. So in the interest of that, I'd suggest we move on to the next.
Let's go back. Josh, if you could take us into the Q&A, and let's hear some questions from the participants. So back into Mentimeter, if you would, and we'll just have open-ended questions, and it'll be anonymous, and Paul and I can address anything you have. I know people had in the survey expressed their expectations. And so, did we meet your expectations? And is there something that you expected that you can throw out as a question to us? Feel like we're in the stump the expert phase.
And let me name it. We've actually decided today to cut out some content. So there are things that we wanted to talk about that we know are important, but we think that your questions will probably unearth. And if we can contextualize them to your experiences and the challenges that you face with facilitation, that's going to make the learning experience much richer. If you prefer not to type your question, if you want to unmute yourself, and if you're courageous and in a space where you can unmute your video, that will help us just have a little bit more context. You can ask your question verbally as well.
Were you ever facilitating us? Here we go. Paul, I'm looking at you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Great question, because we've all experienced how this doesn't happen. So the key is you have to create some sort of accountability, but before that, people have to clearly know what they're expected to do. So I find when inviting folks into a breakout space, being thoughtful about who you pair people with, or if it's truly random, how long the conversation should take. You want to cut it off before people are able to fully exhaust the topic, right? So that there's energy coming back into the room. And then finally, or really two other things, you want to clarify in a way that they can take with them what they should be talking about, so they don't have to go through the what are we supposed to be talking about moment. So I find PowerPoint slides, chat information, have them write it down before you send it into breakout rooms. And then here's the key. This is the golden nugget for this question, I think, is have them produce something. So one of my favorite approaches, and you've probably experienced this in some classes, is give every breakout room a slide and have them capture some of their insights and wisdom on that slide. And then you as a facilitator can actually see, are all the breakout rooms producing things? And if not, you can check in with those folks, via chat or however, to make sure that they understand the question. So those are just some ways that you can keep people engaged in breakout rooms. In real life setting, when you ask people to turn to their partner, you can hear it, right? You can see it, and there's a social expectation to be engaged. In the digital platform, we don't have that, so you have to provide a little bit more structure.
Oh, I really like that insight. A lot of good insights. The one that really caught my ear was stopping it before the energy runs out. Yeah. So people aren't just sitting around looking at each other, because then they've come down off of that energy. They come back into the group and the energy is low, but you catch them at the top. Then when they come back, that buzz is still going. That's a good point. Walkthroughs.
So Rob, you may need to ask the question that you want to go to next.
When preparing, how do you know if you are doing too much or too little? That's what's up on my screen.
Yeah, that's what I see as well. I can start on this, and I don't think you can ever prepare too much.
Again, please do.
Yeah, you really can't. One of my greatest strengths is intellection. I love to analyze and think about things, and I've often been accused of overthinking. In the art of preparation, I think that serves folks well, because you're thinking about all the possible variables and what if this happens, what if this happens. I think the red flag to too much preparation is if it's causing anxiety. Preparation should reduce anxiety, not cause anxiety. So that's my thought there. Rob, what would you add to that?
Well, I got to tell you, I interpreted the question a little differently, and that's me. when preparing, how you know if you're doing too much or too little, I thought maybe it meant too much or too little during the session, like too much activities, not too much preparing. So I like how you took it, because you can stress out over too much. And so it really comes, for me, a point in time, if you're preparing too much, I just know it's like, okay, I need to stop. I just need to take a break. And so I build in breaks in my preparation. I work on it, walk away from it for a little bit. And we did that, Paul. We worked on it over Thanksgiving into December, and then we walked away from it over the holiday break and then came back around. And that gives you time to reflect a little bit. Now, the way I interpret the question when preparing, do you know if you're doing too much or too little during the discussion? For me, it's walkthroughs, and just keep running through the session and running through the session. And I start out wanting to dump everything into the session and then pull the things apart. So there's two answers to one question.
This is a great one. What do you think is the most important part of facilitating discussions?
And I had my answer clicked in just like this, and Paul, it's what you taught me through all this, but I'm not going to say that first. You go ahead.
I think it's the heart of the facilitator. It's the humility to know that in this space, you're not the expert. You're a caretaker of the process, and the group has the responsibility to have a productive conversation. Your responsibility is to set the table, to host, right? So it's a framework, or it's a mindset that I think is the most important part of facilitating discussions.
And that's exactly where my head went. And that's what my takeaway from doing all this and preparing for this and working with you, Paul, my big takeaway is just exactly what you said, that the role facilitator, it's different from it's really different from being a presenter. When you're the presenter, you're the focus, but when you're a facilitator, you're off on the side. That's great. No, that's very, very important. Thanks for sharing that.
Before we go to the next question, I'd love to hear, I'd love to invite challenge to that, right? So has anyone stepped into a facilitator role where what I just said is not true, where that wouldn't serve you well? If you can give us the example, I'd love to just hear about some different challenges to facilitation, because we might be able to nuance that answer a bit that's more helpful for you. That's my dog in the background. Somebody just came down the driveway. So.
We don't have dogs in the innovation and creativity lab unless they're 3D printed, but they don't bark too much.
All right, so we won't take your silence as assuming that we're 100% right, because at the same time, like there are aspects of facilitation that I am absolutely still learning. So again, I invite the challenge, I invite the hard questions, stump the chump here. That will create a great learning environment. So next question we see here is, what do you do when the discussion strays away from the topic or you stray away from the schedule? What do you think, Rod?
Oh, I don't know if I've done it. I mean, I don't know if I've done enough I've participated in enough high profile when this has happened, but I've never really facilitated one where this happened. I'm sure you might have or have some tips here. I was going to say, take a break, but that doesn't do it.
Taking a break is a great technique. There are different types of discussions that we find ourselves in. And I find, when things are starting to stray, the whole group, often most of the group desperately desires it to get back on track, right? So it's okay to say, hey, we've gone off into a direction that I didn't expect that may not be serving us well right now. Let's take 5 so we can kind of reset and come back and reorient where we're going. So taking a break is almost never a bad idea. It's also a great tactic if things get heated, or if you as the facilitator start to get triggered by something that somebody is saying or asking, or kind of an attitude in the space. You can say, hey, things are getting heated right now. Let's take 5. take some deep breaths, take care of our human needs, and we'll come right back to this topic in a couple moments. Give yourself some time. So something else you can do when discussions stray away is it comes back to your preparation, and it comes back to the group's expectations of the time. So as a facilitator, you shouldn't really care about the end product. Your charge is to care about the process to get to the end product that the group is asking you to get to, right? So if things are going off topic, as a facilitator, you can simply name, hey, it seems like we're going a little bit off topic here. When we started this conversation, I heard you say that you wanted to get to this point. Or, hey, when we started, we have all these agenda items. In order to honor those things, we need to come back to this agenda or this topic. So essentially, you're simply naming for the group, hey, we're off topic. And then either asking them to say, yeah, let's go back to the agenda, or you can even say, it sounds like this might be a valuable thing to discuss. Should we talk about this instead of working through our original plan? Right, so the facilitator's job is to help the group navigate the use of time.
Couple things that I've seen, I haven't used, but I've seen used and participated in, is this concept of a parking lot. If you do go down a tangent and you stray, you don't want to discount that or make that stray wrong or anybody associated with that tangent. So what I've seen done is, we acknowledge, okay, we're down on a tangent, let's pull it back. But let's put that tangent in a parking lot, and there's a separate sheet of paper or a separate place where the people or the topic is still honored and still important when it's sitting in that parking lot. It's still visual, and it suggests that it's important, and it'll be revisited at another time. So just whacking off the stray can sometimes, offend people. We don't want to do that. So I have found where that parking lot concept honors the concept or the tangent at the same time getting back to the original path.
Coming back to our guiding principles, the first one we shared with you today was we need everyone's wisdom to reach the wisest result. And oftentimes there is wisdom in those off-the-wall comments or the stray paths that folks take us down. And as a facilitator, this comes back to your preparation of understanding the group and understanding what they care about, to know if there's wisdom that you need to invite into the space and help the group see, maybe we're not straying here, we're straying in a direction that the group needs to go. So again, it's to Rod's point, how do you honor the wisdom in the space in a way that everyone feels psychological safety?
When faced with various opinions on a subject within a group, how have you got it or settled on a compromise without offending one party?
Rod, do you want to start, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
I'm thinking this is probably one good for you.
Yeah, so there are many approaches for this. So I'll give a couple examples. And if you have a specific context, the person that asked this question that you'd be willing to share either in the chat or unmute yourself, I'm happy to address very specific challenges too. But in general, you need to think about the level of conflict in a group. So if you have two diametrically opposed political organizations, let's say indigenous people and a mining company, right? The tools and the structures that you use to come to a compromise without offending a party are going to be different than if you're on a planning team working to choose which artists we want to bring to campus for the next big concert where we can all actually get together in a room, right? Because the weight and the lived experience and the ways that things intersect with culture are different in both of those conversations. So on the ground level, anytime you have differencing of opinions, it's important to make sure that really there are 4 things that are attended to. The first one is, what are we talking about? Like, what's the shared data? So I like to have something visual. Maybe it's an article, it's a statement, it's the goals of the session. What are people reacting to, right? What are the objective things that we can see, hear, taste, touch, and feel about this thing? Oftentimes it's hear and see, but let people talk about that. Then I like to give folks space to be effective. So to have emotion, I would never ask people, how do you feel? As a facilitator, I encourage you to strike that from your lexicon, because as soon as you directly ask about feelings, people start to shut down. It brings out cultural norms and assumptions that aren't helpful for everyone in the room. So try to stay away from asking about feelings, but instead I'd say, what about this thing that we can all see, hear, touch, taste, and smell frustrates you? What about this excites you? What questions does this raise for you? Right, so I'm asking questions about feelings, but I'm not asking about feelings. So let people verbalize and emote and share. The next thing you want to talk about, so we've talked about what is the objective that we're talking about here? What's the effective response to it? Then you want to think about implications. So make sure that everyone from different opinions on a subject gets to talk and verbalize and express, if we do this, what's going to happen? What are the implications of this thing that we're talking about? And then finally, this is the question, I think, how do you actually make the decision? You can't do that unless everyone has had the opportunity to talk about what they're talking about, talk about how they feel about it, talk about the implications. If one of those groups is missing, you're going to offend somebody because the process wasn't complete. So finding a way to make sure that kind of every way of knowing and thinking about a topic is explored before you come to a decision point is key to any decision-making tool you may use. And I'd encourage you to simply Google group decision-making tool, and you'll have 5 or 6 options to choose from that are appropriate for different complexities of decisions. So that's just some quick theory. I probably didn't answer the question specifically. So again, feel free if you want a specific answer, put the context in the chat. Try to stump the chump. I'd love to talk more specifically.
Any other questions? We have some remaining time. Check the schedule here.
The other thing as a facilitator that I'd encourage you to craft is your willingness to be in silence. So we're going to continue to let you think about questions, and it's going to feel awkward for us. I'm naming that right now to both privilege that, to say that's good, and also to give you a chance to review and think through what have we talked about. What about it makes sense? What about it's muddy? Because we want to provide the best value to you. So let's take some time in silence to think about other possible questions. And feel free to jump in when you have one.
All right, no more questions. So let's move into our final stages here. And we're going to move back into our final breakout session. And Josh, do we have those? Yep, here we go. So remember, the 4th stage was planning and applying and thinking about what happens after the discussion or the session is over. And that's what we would like for you to do next. So how will you apply the knowledge and skills you learned today? You know, what are the opportunities you have here at Gettysburg College or the other parts of your life where you're facilitating a discussion? And how will you test this new knowledge and skills? Will you allow somebody to give you some feedback, or will you record, or will you practice? So Now, a lot of things to think about. We ask you to jump into your breakout rooms again and share that with somebody. And then we have a final question for you, and then we'll wrap up and address any questions that might pop up after the breakout rooms. Thanks, Josh, for moving us into those. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Wrapping up here. So is everybody back? Out of the rooms?
Yeah, Rod, everyone's here that's here.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you. So we have a question. Would anybody be willing to turn off their video and share what they shared in the breakout room? Peter, you up? Okay.
I already got the video on, so I might as well go.
All right.
I was with Sarah, and we talked about just me and her both like discussed it once we first started, like what we do and stuff like that and how we would be able to use it. And I think that's something that we talked about that would be very good is like facilitating a discussion in classrooms. Oftentimes in Gettysburg with our liberal arts education, the professors put you in positions where you are the one that is leading the discussion, which, is also very helpful because it makes sure that you're engaged. And I specifically mentioned that I like the aspect of like trying to control it over Zoom because my 3 classes this upcoming semester are all online. And I know the one professor that I had like sophomore year likes us to read like a certain chapter and have 3 people like present on it. And I don't know if she's going to still have that format over Zoom, but I think that, trying to make sure that everyone's engaged and that kind of aspect was very helpful to learn about. And then I also talked about me as a senior. I don't know if there's other seniors on the call, like, being ready to kind of present yourself and facilitate discussion around you when it's coming to jobs, and job interviews and, for doing applications and like presenting yourself in the best way possible. So I thought that that was all very interesting things that, could be used and taken away from this session.
Peter, I love that you've made the connection of facilitating and interviewing because it absolutely can be one and the same.
I picked up on that too, and I just about jumped up and down. That was brilliant.
Yeah, if you were to go through the process that we talked about in facilitating a potential employer's understanding of you as a candidate as the primary aim, that could really serve you well. So great insight.
Anybody else willing to share?
I could share.
All right. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. So I really liked the 5 things that we talked about with purpose, participants, environment, form, rules. And I think that like I'm a sophomore, so I still have like a lot of conversations that I will have with like advisors and professors. So I would think that that's like really helpful when like I'm preparing to have those conversations with those people to like really know what I want to say and like have that like a good interaction with them that's like really productive.
Absolutely. Great example.
Yeah, Sarah, I appreciate that you're thinking, it sounds like in a one-on-one context, right?
Yeah, like one-on-one. Yeah, work on like yeah, we also talked about like I was with Kyle and we talked about like being in a Zoom and like how this is just really helpful for that environment too, but also like the one-on-one conversations that you have with people that like can seem intimidating, like if they're like above you and like you like they have like power and like they have like a lot of wisdom and you want to really get to like the purpose of it and like have a productive conversation.
Yeah. Be careful though, creating your facilitator's guide, a spreadsheet with all the times on it, because if you walk into a meeting with that, it may be a little overwhelming. My family, my wife specifically says, don't facilitate me. Don't use these tactics on me. I know what you're doing. But Sarah, so glad you're making those connections.
That's great. That's great. We probably have time for one more share if somebody would like to. If not, we can move into our last question that we have for you. This has been fantastic. Anybody else would like to share? This has been great insights, great connections. Okay, Josh, let's go back into Mentimeter and let's bring up that last slide and ask our final question of the day. So, just so we get some feedback and we can plan for the next time, what did you find engaging about this session? We're going to use the word art again. There's going to be a survey coming out Friday afternoon-ish to ask you some questions on your experience with all the sessions in which you participated. Again, this is, as I mentioned, this is the first time we've done this, and in a little bit, and should this happen again next year? Should we add some more sessions? So you'll get that survey, and you'll help to shape the future. Polling, yep, answering questions. Good answers, good answers. Speak, breakout rooms, yep. Oh, thank you. And Mentimeter, please feel free to use it. It's a great tool. Nobody mentioned my orange sweater, Paul.
Oh, that's under enthusiasm of speakers, I think.
Oh, that's right. And I even got my orange hat ready to go too if I need to, if it gets cold here. So definitely got to keep the orange and blue out in front. These are great feedback phrases and words. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, Paul, or?
Will folks have our contact information after the session? Is there a way to send that out?
They have it in the reminder emails I sent. So please feel free. And the one thing, yeah, it might not have had your email, so I'll send it out. I'll send it out again. It's a good thing. Thank you for bringing that up, because
yeah,
it has your name.
I want to offer that part of my job is helping to develop a culture of facilitation at Gettysburg. So if you have a question, if you're planning something and you're stuck or you're just not sure of an idea of how to design it, please do reach out via email. I'm happy to set up and provide design support. I love this work. If you can't tell that already, I love this work, and I'm happy to support you in the process.
Well, excellent. Yes, I will, Paul. Thanks again for bringing that up, because I just only put your general bio data. I never put your email in, so I'll send something out. Good suggestion. Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, no other questions, nobody raising a hand, nothing in the chat, I'm just so grateful you joined us today. Thank you very much. It's fun. I'm doing 3 of these sessions this week, and the first 2 have just been fantastic, and I appreciate your participation. So have a good day, be safe, until we see you again.